Welcome to another episode of the Bandage Podcast, a weekly wrap-up of the most trending healthcare news. Each week, we'll discuss the latest in healthcare, health IT, and compliance.
In this week's episode, we discussed the fifth person cured of HIV, the pervasiveness of disordered eating, and an uptick in stomach bug cases. Let's wrap things up. This is episode 174 for the week of February 27th. I'm Matt Moneypenny.
And I'm Albert Battistelli.
Before we get started, our diagnosis code of the week is Z62.891, sibling rivalry. Oh my gosh.
I want to be diagnosed with sibling rivalry.
That's kind of crazy. I feel like that's a psychological diagnosis usually, maybe. I don't know.
I would think.
I guess not. I mean,
my sibling rivalry would get kind of physical. I pushed my brother down once and it knocked the tooth out of his mouth.
Whoa.
I know.
He would have gotten sibling rivalry then in that case.
I know. I think I cried harder than he did, though. I was so sad.
You're like, oh my God, I didn't mean to do that. I'm a monster.
Oh, yep, exactly. That kind
what
of
am I to do?
What have I become?
Oh my gosh. Well, interesting. Anyways, First up, we've got it's fundamentally possible. Researchers have announced that a 53-year-old man in Germany has become the fifth person in history to be cured of HIV. The patient, known as Dusseldorf patient, received a stem cell placement 10 years ago and has not taken HIV medication in 4 years. While being the fifth person cured, the Dusseldorf patient is the only third person to be cured through a stem cell transplant. From the time of the procedure, the virus has not been detectable in his body. Stem cell transplants are high-risk procedures that are normally reserved for cancer patients. The Dusseldorf patient was the same, diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, a deadly form of blood cancer, just after beginning treatment for HIV. So this guy's kind of had it rough.
Yeah, he's had it rough.
He's got cancer and HIV, and they were diagnosed essentially around the same time. That is a rough go at it.
But good to know that the HIV is pretty much cured, so that's cool.
Right. That is a good thing to know, for sure. Whoa.
Interesting. It's so fascinating what they're doing with stem cells and like the things they can like treat that way.
Yeah.
I have no idea how that even works. Like, what do you just like remove somebody's cells and then put new ones in them, or do you just
I have no idea. It's futuristic.
Yeah, to me it sounds insane.
It doesn't seem like it's something that is like a standard procedure or anything like that. So it seems like it's something out of a sci-fi movie, to be quite honest with you. But I'm glad that it's working out for him. I wonder, it's working for the HIV. Hopefully it's also working for the cancer.
Yeah. I would hope that something's working for the cancer.
Hopefully.
Yeah. I hope something's working for the cancer.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next up, parents beware. A meta-analysis published last week on Monday found a staggering 22% of children and adolescents display signs of disordered eating. Disordered eating can take many forms, including frequent dieting, weight fluctuation, and feelings of guilt associated with eating. In order to gather the data for their meta-analysis, the authors analyzed 32 studies from 16 different countries, including the US, the UK, Spain, Germany, China, South Korea, and Slovenia. The final result showed more than 1 in 5 children and adolescents displayed behaviors of disordered eating, with numbers being higher among girls, older children, and those with a higher BMI.
Yeah. I think, unfortunately, this makes sense.
It does.
People who have... Go ahead.
I was going to say, by this definition, I just am a disordered eater because I constantly feel guilty about what I eat. I'm like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have ate that. Like,
it's a very general. It's a very general definition that's easy to make out.
Yeah,
it's a very general definition, and the stereotypes associated with this kind of thing is just only enhanced more so by this kind of study. So
that's true. And I feel like I usually, when I think of eating disorders, I think of like bulimia or
the
anorexia, like the big ones. I never think of something where you just like feel crappy about yourself after you eat, but I suppose that is sort of a disorder as well.
Yeah, it's just a disorder in its own right.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, wash your hands. Whoa. The dreaded stomach bug season is here and spreading fast. The numbers of neurovirus cases are rising steadily in the U.S., mirroring the outbreaks noted in the UK. According to reports, neurovirus cases are 66% higher than the average at this time of year in England, with the biggest rise in confirmed cases seen in people aged 65 and older. Neurovirus spreads easily from person to person and through contaminated food and drink and can make you miserable for days. With children back in school, neurovirus is almost inevitably going to rise. The same measures used to prevent the transmission of COVID-19 can be implemented to avoid neurovirus infections. Stomach bug. It's always crazy. Anytime you get people together, people just get sick.
I know.
It's like, hey, welcome back to school, kids. Well, kids are gross, right? But it's like
kids are gross.
The same thing with work. Like you go to work every day, one person's sick, and they just cause this mini outbreak in your office, and then everyone has it, and hopefully you're not one of them who gets it because that's not fun. So
right. Over the next 2 weeks, people just call off for a day or two, and then they're back, and then someone else calls it, like just rolls through. Pretty gross.
And with that, let's go on to our next segment.
BREACH, Breach Patrol. It's a breach! All of the latest cybersecurity breaches.
Welcome to Breach Patrol. Please talk about the world. Oh my gosh, Albert.
Go make that patch.
Whoa.
Web hosting services provider GoDaddy disclosed, which I just love that name, GoDaddy. Web hosting services provider GoDaddy disclosed a multi-year security breach that enabled unknown threat actors to install malware and siphon source code related to some of its services. The company attributed the campaign to a sophisticated and organized group targeting hosting services. The company said that the December 2022 incident is connected to 2 other security events it encountered in March 2020 and November 2021.
Dun dun dun. Whoa.
The price is right when
There's
you
a reason
miss or
for
something.
Patches, turns out.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably. You want to make sure that you're keeping up to date.
Watch out.
I feel like so many people are afraid to download patches to things because they think it's going to screw something up, but then it just ends up.
Sometimes, right?
They do. They're not always perfect, but then they like end up biting themselves in the butt because.
That's right. Things go south very quickly. Patches exist to protect you, and in this case, GoDaddy needs a patch because they haven't done it yet, right? So they're saying that malware was siphoning source code, which is not good.
Right. So patch it up, folks.
Especially when GoDaddy is more expensive than like Google domains.
Right. What are you doing?
It's like you can be more expensive, but just make sure that you have your stuff buttoned up.
Right,
like
for sure.
The minimum you can do.
Yeah, can you please just at least have a viable product?
Right. Next up, paying the price. What?
Nothing. I keep interrupting you.
I'm just moving.
Yeah, you are. You're cruising today.
Next up, paying the price. DNA Diagnostic Center, a DNA testing company, shocker, will pay a penalty of $400,000 to the Attorney General of Pennsylvania and Ohio for a breach that occurred in 2021 that affected 2.1 million individuals nationwide. The company will also be required to implement improvements to its data security, including updating the asset inventory of its entire network and disabling or removing any assets identified that are not necessary for any legitimate business purpose. Whoa. Business purposes.
I know. I love that they could possibly have something that's just not necessary for any legitimate business purpose. Like, oh, you have this information? Why? We don't need you to have that. Get out of here. Like, doesn't have anything to do with you.
Yeah, why would they have data more than they need?
Right. Also, who decides
I guess from their
that?
perspective, take as much data as you can, but also that's like that means that the breach that occurred happened and dealt with data that they didn't need for a legitimate business purpose.
Right.
So not only did they have the data, it was also sensitive data, and they didn't even need it.
Which is funny because they're a DNA diagnostic center. I assume they have like data on like your blood type, like all this health information, or at least stuff for like, I don't know, genetic information about you. So what an interesting like line. Like, what do you need to know about my genetics? What don't you? Like, you get rid of that. You don't need to know that my eyes are brown, but you do need to know that I'm a high risk for heart disease, or like, I don't know what the line is.
They certainly paid the price.
They sure did.
Is no joke.
No, it's not. All right, unauthorized access. On February 17th, 2023, O'Neill Industries Inc. filed a notice of data breach after learning that confidential consumer information stored on the company's computer network was accessible to an unauthorized party. Based on the company's official filing, the incident resulted in an unauthorized party gaining access to consumers' names, addresses, and social security numbers. Ooh, that's the bad one. After confirming that consumer data was leaked, O'Neill Industries began sending out data breach notification letters to all individuals who were impacted by the recent data security incident. Hate to see it. Hate to see those SS numbers out there.
I feel like maybe it's time we find an upgraded version of a social security number, because at this point it's essentially just essentially personally identifiable information, which is the lowest form of data. PII, it's like your email and your name. Essentially now every breach is just like, hey, social security numbers,
right, thrown in there, which is like, it's funny because that's used for like your security for like so many things. It's like, hey, you either have to know your account number or your social security number and we'll let you into your account. I'm like, okay, cool.
It also blows me away just how many organizations know your social security number.
Right.
Because
for what legitimate business purpose?
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that O'Neill Industries shouldn't have everyone's social security number. Maybe what they deal with is very important, but I think there needs to be some kind of reform associated with what you need social security numbers for versus what you don't need. Because like I said, it's just becoming like, hey, you got a hack? Well, thanks for your social security number, sucker.
Right.
So.
Oy,
indeed. And that's it for this week's wrap up of your weekly healthcare news. I'm Matt Moneypenny.
And I'm Bob Rotelli.
Bye. We'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Bandage Podcast produced by eTactics.